Welcome in, open wide the doors to fandom and sports fandom now. All of you out there, as I always say, you are all the Fandoms Finest, and together we'll come in here and talk. Got this episode for you that we recorded moments after the Super Bowl ended, but we had major audio problems. Something went wrong, so we lost a whole lot of it. So it's going to start, and you're going to hear it a little bit out of context, but most of the good stuff is there, so we didn't want to go back and try to re-record anything. So we hope you'll enjoy, and hey, like, subscribe, get us on the road. Maybe we'll get a Patreon one day and get us some better equipment so we won't have to do this. But I just want to let you guys know that's why this one starts a little bit out of order. And anyways, hope you enjoy. So, EDL.
Yeah?
Any thoughts on the New Orleans lawsuit or the Saints fans' grievances?
I couldn't give a
This guy's the top A, just most accurate. They were just making it sound like basically Goff was going to be what Patrick Mahomes delivered this year, right? And it was funny because what happened in the Super Bowl was they did not put tremendous pressure on him. They knocked him down, a good deal. Yeah, he had a little bloody arm or he had smacked his hand. That happens in any football game, right? But with the game on the line, where it wasn't even like you had to really force the issue, you were only down 10-3. And your receiver had just dropped the ball, right, which we'll get to in a second. But, again, it was Goff, pressure in his face, not in the most perfect spot. This is where all those analytics and all those numbers and all the, like you said, all the genius coach of McVay. This was that moment for them to perform, and he chucked the ball up, and it just got picked off as anybody who can, the eye test, right? And I understand that billion-dollar franchises, they're not going to hire somebody like me to go out there and say, I got the eye test and I can, this guy got the magic eye and this guy has it. But at the same time, most of us that are fans and sports fans, we can just see it. And that's what you got with Jared Goff. He had rushed 2 throws against New Orleans, would have put the game away. There never would have been a controversy about that penalty because the Rams would have had a comfortable lead. And then there it was late in the game in the Super Bowl. And when, again, he had pressure in his face and he had to rear back, he just let it fly. The numbers, the statistics would tell you, well, this is where the guy, you want a guy like that. This is where his numbers are great. Well, in the biggest stage in them all, it failed. Right? And that's what I told you last year with Jimmy Garoppolo. You were all over the Garoppolo train and, and trying to encourage me, well, you should start watching the 49er games again, all this stuff. And I'm like, okay. So I gave the guy a look through a couple of YouTube videos and I watched a couple of the live games. And what did I tell you? I said he's inaccurate. Right? Everybody else was calling him Saint Jimmy and everything else, but it's the eye test, and it's about where do you place the ball. If you can't get the ball where it needs to be and you're hanging it off on the corner, you're eventually going to run into a team in the playoffs, right? And especially if you get to the championship games, you're going to run into those teams that are going to take that stuff to the house. And all you saw this year before his injury, interception after interception, almost threw the Lions game away. Horrific performance up there in Minnesota against the they weren't the best defense this year, but they were coming off a good year, and you could just see it. And so, that's a perfect example. Goff absolutely completely failed his test, was lucky to get into the Super Bowl. And now, like I said, Jimmy G didn't look so good. Now, of course, he lost the back half of the season, so we'll find out. He'll have a lot more weapons probably going into next year. Maybe he can correct those mistakes, but you have a league now built on this thing where it's like look at how he performed in New England. Look at Goff in college, and now the numbers, the statistics. Look at how these numbers are so awesome. And the teams are going out and they're picking those guys, and they're just falling flat on their freaking face, right? That's the other problem I kind of have with the direction the league is going. And I thought it was that's what I took away from this Super Bowl. All that talk about genius and numbers and statistics, and we can predict everything, and we've got all the different measurements, and we've got all the bag of tricks. We can throw everything at you, and this is the future of football. So that's what you're going to get, interception. You don't have to throw that fast. You're down 10-3. You throw a lousy interception that pretty much almost seals the game, right? Or you wind up being Jimmy G and you barely win a game in your first 4 games, and then you lose the season, right? And and there's a lot of that coming out. I mean, look at Mahomes. Mahomes is everything everybody wants, and he fell past how many teams before the Chiefs picked him up? So that's the other problem that I see with the league is it doesn't seem like anybody has that quote-unquote magic eye anymore. It used to be simple. Just, the guy has to pass the eye test. Yeah, the numbers are great, but is he actually putting the ball where it needs to be? This running back, yeah, he can run over 10 people. Is he actually holding the ball so that when you play the better teams, he's not going to fumble the ball 3 times and your team is bounced out of the playoffs? right? That's the other frustration I see, and I think where you saw, like you said, that it culminated the NFL season and how the tone of the game went. I more saw it in the performance of the players. So I'm curious. I mean, what do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, the whole Jimmy G thing is just more or less of a, you know, it's not 100% sure what's going to break down because, I feel like this season, obviously starting off at the beginning of the season, there was a lot more stress, and there's always that kind of stress and anxiety that sits with athletes, because it's like you have to actually perform. I mean, this year nobody came in with any expectations of what Patrick Mahomes is going to be. And now he's an MVP quarterback. He's a Pro Bowl quarterback. Next year, the limelight's going to be on Kansas City. So it's going to be really interesting to see what next season is going to prove of Patrick Mahomes. And I think kind of the same year this year for Jimmy Garoppolo is what it was. Beforehand, the pressure was never on him to perform. The pressure was never there. It was just more like, hey, here's the play, run it, do what you can, and he shined in those moments. But the city, I mean, so, this year it's like the first, in the first 4 weeks, everybody kind of played skittish. I mean, the Saints looked like they didn't know what an offensive snap looked like at the beginning of the season. They were so inconsistent with themselves. And, everybody looked, everybody came out of the season because, I mean, you can go into the whole intricacies of it now with the collective bargaining agreement. There's no scrimmage, there's no pads, there's no hitting or stuff like that. So, to actually come out of the gates ready to perform is always going to be difficult for teams nowadays because that's just the new era we live in. So, outside of that, I mean, we're never going to know what this year was going to entail with them. And then, it's going to be interesting to see how Jimmy would kind of bounce back from his injuries now, because a leg injury is always kind of hard for a quarterback because, that's where most of their power is when it comes to throwing, the mechanics and everything of it. So, I mean, outside of that, it's, for me, it's just one of those things where it's like the bigger issue with the league in general and with athletes in general nowadays is just, nobody has, it seems like the league is split into two different divisions. It's like there's everybody else and then there's the New England Patriots and how things are done, because when the Philadelphia Eagles won last year, the offensive lineman, I think it was Lane Johnson, I'm not 100% sure, it could have been Kelsey, who said, like, I'd rather win with the Philadelphia Eagles than be with the Patriots because we have fun here. And that was kind of a big thing, right? Because it kind of came down to, well, what do you want to have in the NFL? Do you want to have fun or do you want to win? Right. Or do you want to win while having fun, or, do you want to be successful like the Patriots are, right? And I listened to a lot of people, and it's kind of hilarious that 9 times out of 10, a lot of the athletes were like, I'd rather have fun, And so I just kind of feel like, nowadays, it just seems like, it legitimately seems like there is a league that is just kind of more or less focused on individual performances and just doing your own thing. And then you have the New England Patriots, which is all about the kind of more business side of sports, where it's like, you're here to do a job, you're here to bring championships to the franchise. Right. And that's how they've always kind of attacked the league, is that
right. It's do your job, right?
Yeah.
Do your job. Bring me the film from the other team. Do your job and get those signals. No, I
it's not about what one person can do. It's about what the team can do for what can you do for the success of the team, whether instead of what can the team do for the success of you. And so, it's just kind of one of those things where it's
JFK
like
football.
Well, and
fitting that's a New England area,
right?
With that JFK, what can you ask not, anyways.
And so for me, it's just kind of like, it's just, like I said, it's just one of those things where, like, I see what goes on around the league, and it's just like, you got guys like Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, and they want to get paid the max amount of money, and they're super talented and stuff, but it's like, that's going to end up costing a franchise, no matter who decides to break the bank on. That's going to end up costing the franchise, the ability to build a competitive team to go into the playoffs or anything, because there's New England. And, once this regime is over, whenever that may be, in the next 5 years, when Belichick and Brady and all those people decide to leave, or, however it's going to happen from that point forward, it'll be interesting to see what the league does after that, because, as much as it is to see the New England Patriots always there, not having the Patriots there is going to open up a lot more things, but also, like, is it going to end up like is it going to kind of end up like the NBA, where it's like there's a void,
right?
Well,
that's what I talked to you about before in the past, because I grew up a San Francisco fan, and I was just I just couldn't help but laugh at the owner after having the team that was within inches of winning championships, and he had the coach that to change the entire environment to a winning environment, and then he fires him. And when his press conference was just laughable, because he was talking about, well, around here it's about winning, and we win the Super Bowls, and we've been close, but that being close is not winning. And he laid out all this stupid case of his. But his idea was that he talked the talk, but as I told you, if you actually paid attention to what he was doing, he was cutting corners to save as much money as he could. He was that stadium they have is not even a football stadium. They've been playing there for what, 5 years? It's not even a football stadium. It was a joke, but it's actually accurate to say that Santa Clara Stadium, it's the house that Taylor Swift built, right? And he's got a restaurant and a wine bar, and it's got a museum. That's why I said, what, I'm done with this now, because they're not they can talk the talk, but they're not truly dedicated to winning or even putting a good product out there. It's all about excuses, and he's built a museum team so that you can go up there and look at some flat screen TV playing you some game from 1946, and listen to Dwight Hicks and the Hot Licks and the stories from the early 80s and all that nonsense, right? And that's kind of the, like, that was the other part of what I was saying. So, I mean, that's one team, and then, that's one team, and then there are other teams and players around the whole league, like you said, that they kind of have that new mentality like that, to get paid, try to do the best you can, but, it's not that vicious dedication, like you said, that New England has, even if that's you may not respect it, because they have certainly gone well beyond the point of fairness in trying to achieve their goals, right? Not to say the other teams don't, but they do it so bad they've been caught on several occasions. So, and again though, it's well, I mean, if that's your concern, then I mean, do you see a way out of that for the league going forward out of this? Because this can't be what the NFL wants. The NFL cannot want the cloud of bad calls on full display, the referee mistakes on full display in both of those championship games, and then to have all the controversy about the overtime rules, and then to go into this game and have it be so dang boring, to where it was just probably the most boring Super Bowl I've watched. And it was that's again, like I said, to me it's a culmination of everything. The way the league is, the way the culture has gone, all that, those smarty pants with all their, well, we have, mathematics, and we have analytics, and again, we've got all the bag of tricks, and we know everything. It's like, yeah, but all that produced 3 points, and that was the single most pathetic offensive performance I have ever seen for a team in the Super Bowl. And that is, I mean, the Giants, who got absolutely steamrolled by the Ravens in the 2000 Super Bowl, I mean, at least they were trying. At least he was throwing the ball into coverage, and they were fighting. They were losing the fight for the ball. They were losing the fight at the line of scrimmage, and Kerry Collins got picked off 900 times, but at least they were out there trying and fighting. The Rams were literally going out there, getting sacked, taking a 1-yard dive and losing a yard or two, throwing the ball on the turf, and then, kicking the ball to New England, who only scored 10 points through the majority of the game. That can't be what the NFL wants, for its culmination. That, like, those last 3 weeks of the season, and then all this, it just seems like a big dud. And what do we if I had watched all season long and every game, and then this is how it ended, I would have really felt like it would have been like, being promised by a television show, you're going to watch 20 episodes on Netflix and all this kind of stuff, right? And all the episodes are average, and then you go to, like, watch the movie, right? And it's a dud movie, right? It feels like,
again, kind of backtracking on that kind of goes back to what I was stating earlier, and to kind of reiterate, or at least kind of read another point to it. the greatest game to ever play, the new era, quote unquote, the what we want, what is the NFL, blah, all these new things, the new era, blah blah blah. The Chiefs and the Rams, right? Everybody talked about that, right? What was it? Oh my God, look at all these points, look at all this stuff and everything, right? You know, you got the rule changes, you got the players, you know, and I saw that and I was like, that's okay, that's cute, but that's not the new NFL. And the reason is because the Chiefs have arguably one of the worst defenses ever constructed. I mean, their defensive plan essentially just seems like let them score so we can get Patrick Mahomes back on the field. Um, that at times that really did seem like that was their defensive strategy. And then you know on the Rams side of it, it was like they were hurt. They were kind of not at 100% on defense, but still, you know that team was just a mess. You know, in that middle season. So you know you had all these points and everything, but I'm like, okay, yeah, but when a good defense actually challenges them, or somebody that actually can scheme against, you know, this offense and everything, what are you going to do? And you know, looking at the Super Bowl, that's kind of what happened. You know, it was again, you know, what happened to the Chiefs, you know, in the AFC Championship game. Yeah, they had their offense, they had their pushes and everything, but at the end of the day, New England controlled the game. New England's defense controlled that offense. You know, Tyreek Hill had one catch for 42 yards. You know, again, that amazing high-powered, oh my God, they can take the top off of anybody, you know, fell victim to a defense that can scheme against them. And, you know, this Super Bowl, again, it was no different. You know, that defense had, for all intents and purposes, you know, the Rams scouted, and the Rams never adjusted from what I can tell because, you know, their philosophy of, oh, we'll run lateral against everybody because we have the athletic talent to get around any defense. Okay, but when a defense is going to not let you do that, what are you going to do? Well, we're just going to sit there and kind of crumble and fall. It seemed like that was their game plan after that. You know, it seemed like Sean McVay could not figure anything out, and that offense was not willing to do anything else around that. And so when, you know, when everything else kind of from there fell apart, you know, again, it's like, yeah, you know, it seems more, like I said, that this Super Bowl was a course correction again from what we saw this season being, you know, oh, everybody here, you know, hyping up high-powered offenses, but at the end of the day, the defense is still going to win. A defense is still going to, you know, carry a championship. And for all intents and purposes, there was only one real defense that was out there. You could say maybe the Ravens had a solid defense, but their offense was a joke. You know,
Yeah.
it was a gimmick, and the gimmick always runs out. But you know, somebody that has a competent offense and a competent defense is going to beat somebody that does not have any game plan for a defense and any hope of an offense that's going to be, you know, adjusting once their game plan is figured out. And that's kind of what happened with the Rams. So you know, like again, you know.
Well, that's my thing is, you know, we're kind of coming at this from slightly different angles, but we're seeing it both being, you know, in the valley of disappointment here. And it's, oh, go ahead.
I'm not necessarily disappointed. I mean, like,
You can't be satisfied with how the playoffs ended, though. Are you really? Were you entertained? You know, are you not entertained? Right, that classic moment in Gladiator. It's like, to me, it's like somebody would throw a rock at Maximus if he had performed like that. If that was his, they would have hit him upside the head with like, no, this shit sucks. You know, I don't know.
I mean, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, in general, like, it was more or less like not necessarily okay. Well, in the idea of like, you know, excitement, I mean, not to make it, you know, I haven't been excited for an NFL playoffs in a while, and not just because, you know, my Broncos are trash, but you know, it's just like, again, it kind of comes back to the whole adage I was saying. Like, I looked at all of these teams that were in the playoffs, and I'm like, okay, you know, breaking it down, the Chargers were probably the only team that, you know, on paper could have posed a threat, but at the same time, I always say it's San Diego. You know, they're the opposite of New England. I don't bet against New England. I always bet against San Diego.
Right.
It just is what it is, because they're always that team that has just for some reason they just know how to let you down at the moment you believe in them, and that's kind of what,
you know. Again, I'm not trying to. I hope it's not like treading over the same territory. But again, that's my point. Is there was a San Diego fan who I was talking to, and I actually thought that they might get it done. They have a chance to, right? But my thought process was it's not working because yes, they've got two good receivers, but you look at how they built the rest of that offense and the rest of the defense. Again, it's this new age NFL where we're gonna try to. I mean, I'm not trying to pick on this guy because I actually really really like this player, but if you're pitting your hopes on Kelvin Benjamin, saving you deep in the playoffs, right? It's just such an unproven product, and it's again what you try to go out there and make a move for drafts. So, and then of course they got Mike Williams, good player, solid player, one of my favorite individual players, right? The other one is always injured. I forget his name. That's his reputation, though, sadly, that he's always injured. But he's a very good receiver.
Keenan Allen.
Yes, Keenan Allen, very good receiver. But again, after those two guys, who's the new tight end, right? And that's my point. Is like you got teams that they're built that way, where like you said, they could do it. They've shown flashes, but when you take a step back, you're like, it's just so unproven, and they're going into having all the odds stacked against them in New England, and so the smart money said they're probably going to get beaten to the ground like a drum, and they did.
But like I said, okay, so you look at San Diego, Baltimore, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Jesus, I'm trying to that's 5, and New England.
Yeah.
I forget the other team that was there. I'm trying to remember.
Nobody cares. They lost.
Essentially.
Houston.
Houston. There you go. Okay. So again, you look at those teams, and then you look at the NFC side where it's the Saints, it's the Eagles, it's the Rams, it's the Cowboys, it's Chicago, and then the other team that Seattle. Okay. So, out of those teams, I would genuinely say, like you look at what they're built on, you look at what they are, and like I said, how many of those teams fit into this is a team that has player-centric, athletes and kind of a stylistic approach to their sports, right? Where it's like, again, okay, so you look at New England. You have your name guys, right? Where it's like, okay, you have Brady, you have Gronk, and Edelman possibly, but he's not really like a household name in that context, right? Maybe just because he's been there for so long, but like you're not looking at Edelman like, oh my God, hey, Odell Beckham Jr. Everybody knows who Odell Beckham is, right? Everybody knows who everybody knows who Russell Wilson is, right? Or everybody knows who, Lamar Jackson because he got really hot this year, right? Or Melvin Gordon from Seattle, right? You have these player-centric teams, right, where it's all about the glitz, the glamour, or the showcase, or, Drew Brees and the Saints, right? And then you have the Patriots that is this machine. Like, there's no other way to define them than they're just a machine. They are just cold, calculated, and meticulous with their with their pregame, with their structure, their systems, everything about them. And they have people that are in there that believe in that system more than themselves, that are going to be more self-sacrificing than egocentric on that. If Sony Michel thinks to himself, I'm worth, double what I'm making here, then they will happily ship him to another team or let him go in free agency, then sign him that money or pay him that money. That is how they are. They are, they are the corporate side of it, the big system, the big Walmart, right? Where it's like you have Brady who plays on the budget, you have Gronk who plays on the budget. Those guys are making a fraction of what they could make anywhere else in the NFL, but in doing so, they have depth. They have people that believe in the system and not in themselves, right? There's no ego in that context, right? Whereas you have like the Rams, again, another problem. Okay, they had Cooper Kupp. They have, Robert Woods. Who else are you going to sit there and really tell me that they have Brandon Cooks? Okay, so they have those guys, but when those guys aren't on the field, who are they relying on? I mean, you have with the Patriots, you have Sony Michel, you have James White, you have Rex Burkhead. They can probably, they put in Cordell Patterson, who's a running back. Yeah. You imagine if Brandon Cooks was ever going to sit back in the backfield? No, he doesn't do that. He's a quote unquote receiver, right? Because that's what he is. He's the glitz and the glamour, and it's the same thing, like I said, with you look at across the board, Kansas City, Baltimore, you look at Phil, you look at teams like Seattle and all this stuff. They are so egocentric in who they are as a player. They're not going to get to the promised land. They're not going to get to the championships because, they don't believe in that. Or if they do win the champion, if they do beat Pittsburgh or New England, right, like Philadelphia did, okay, what happened this year with them? I mean, they struggled more because they bought into their own hype. You had Doug Peterson writing a book and going on a book tour. You have, you bring in guys like Michael Bennett who are very, very more about themselves and about the team.
Extremely, yeah.
And then, you have guys that, are so arrogant and cocky like the offensive line was. That offensive line was, quote unquote, the best offensive line, because they manhandled, quote unquote, New England. Okay, well, this year they were atrocious. They hurt Carson Wentz again. They got him killed again. Nick Foles struggled the first 4 games of in the season because he was consistently under pressure and under duress.
Right.
Yeah, they got it together enough to make another playoff run, but even then, that wasn't that. They eventually kind of just ran out of gas because that team had so many problems. They had so many issues with it. They are focused on fun and having a good time and going and partying and making a name for themselves and everything instead of winning. And it's like, until you have another franchise and New England just completely eviscerates themselves off the map.
Yeah.
This is how it's going. This is going to be the NFL every single year.
Okay. On the other hand, let's look. You mentioned 2 things, and we'll swing around those 2 things to try to close out here. Because on the other hand, though, what does the NFL need to do to, again, I'm a hard case. It would be tough to bring me back and make me an avid fan again, right? But like you said, say you haven't been all that impressed, right? So it sounds like you said, you want to have solid teams who are committed to winning consistently. You'd like to see the NFL return to that with the teams, but also you want to be entertained, and you don't want to have to, you shouldn't have an asterisk hanging over your mind over the season, right? So what can they do to fix that? And is it just a matter of expanding the instant replay? Because everything that you laid out against Philadelphia, well, Philadelphia did it, but this was kind of a fluke thing because Alshon Jeffrey, the most sure-handed individual probably the NFL has seen in decades, and he like Fred Flintstone,
right? Like
bobbled the ball right.
Look at the Super Bowl performance. He came down with some of the biggest catches where it's like he had defenders on him. He's coming down. It's kind of one of those you have to close your eyes and hope to God you catch it. And
wide open, nobody on him, and he just whooped it away.
Slipped right through his hands.
Yeah, okay. But so like you said, so for everything you said, they could have been there, but that went wrong. That's what cost them the game. Okay, so now that team is out. Now, I happen to think, getting to all the New Orleans, this is the first half of the first half of all the New Orleans fans complaining. I do not think for 1 second New Orleans would have brought any better effort to this game, as pathetic as I said the Rams did. It would have been slightly better, but with Drew Brees, I'm sorry, if Goff, if he's falling backwards and he can't make that throw and it gets picked off, you're going to tell me Brees, that's why they turned the ball over in overtime and lost the game, because he was getting hit, didn't have the arm that he used to, and it just sailed in the air, right? And it's just not to dog Brees out. He's had a great career. He's a very good quarterback, but the arm is weakening. He's had problems with that. So, I just don't believe that, with the pressure and like you said, with the secondary New England had, that they would have, okay, but, you never know. Ingram and Kamara's a game breaker. And there were a couple of times when Gurley got loose. There were a couple of times when your old guy C.J. Anderson got loose, and Kamara might have made much more out of that, right? And I think they would have had a much more aggressive game plan. And if you think New England is the worst cheaters on the planet, then you would have had Sean Payton throwing everything in the kitchen sink. But they're out because of what, yes, was a terrible call, because of something I've talked about the NFL. And I think it's ridiculous the way the New Orleans fans and the organization have. I didn't see them go and cry that, the 49ers were robbed in their own stadium playing that Super Bowl. I didn't see them come out and cry about all the bad calls in that game, or like I said, give their championship back for the bounty, the bounty scandal and all that kind of stuff. I didn't see them come out so morally righteous during those. They didn't come out and cry for the Cowboys, and I can go on and on and on, but that's also pointing out the NFL has this consistent problem. So just again for the sake of the argument, it seems like out of the well, I know hindsight is 2020, but it shouldn't have been. I mean, let's just say what it is. It was a horrific call. If you could expand the replay system, it would have been called the other way. I hate it because I hate teams that can go down and just take a knee and then kick a field goal. I think that's just so uninteresting. I love the Madden rules. If you try to play somebody in Madden, they wouldn't let you do that. They'd throw the controller at your face, be like, be a man, right? Run that stuff. Give me the ball. I know. It's probably not going to happen. But if they expand replay, then they would probably fix that system. Maybe you would have had that aggressive team that's willing to throw everything at New England. It would have at least been possibly more entertaining. So is it just a matter of, like I said, you can't, everybody's jaw should still be dropped that Jeffrey dropped the ball like that. But, okay, so the Eagles are out. Now New Orleans is the next team waiting there. And then they, got screwed, despite the fact all the whining is ridiculous about it. But is that enough to try to level the playing? Also, the horrific call. Again, I think it's an even worse call. It was just ridiculous. The guy didn't even touch Tom Brady. Just swiped ever so gently, and it was a roughing the passer, 15 yards, automatic for. I mean, so is fixing that? Is that enough? Because then that conceivably, if the NFL was on the up and up with its referees, then you probably take those points away from New England. They got out of that drive that they were handed with that horrible call, and then it would be Kansas City and New Orleans in the Super Bowl, right? Or New Orleans against New England with possibly putting up a better fight. So is that enough to fix things, just to try to expand the
I don't think so, because I think that's like saying, oh, well, what this country's problem is not to get political, but it's like, oh, what this country's problem is that you have this person in office. You have Obama as president. That's the reason why this country's going in a tank. You have Trump as president. That's the reason why. You got to get the other guy in there. No, the problem that's not the problem. The problem is you have, if you strip everything back, you strip all the noise, the white noise, and all the chaos that's out there right now, at the end of the day, you have a league that has one franchise that is committed, and I mean committed, to being in the Super Bowl, and you have a bunch of other franchises that like to have fun. And it's like, until you get a franchise, and the problem is, and then here's another issue, is that New England built their dynasty in an era where you can be hard, physical, in your face with your players. You can gut check a player, in a certain way where nobody would address your problem as a coach. Whereas now you can't do what Belichick did in the beginning of, at the beginning of his term in the coaches. I don't know exactly what went in the background of it, but you obviously know that there's a different, there's a different tone there. And if you try to, and we've seen that tried to be replicated with any of his coaches that go outside of that type of mentality, right? You see, we saw Charlie Weiss, we saw Romeo Crennel, Josh McDaniels. They try to do the Belichick system, and players just don't respond to it because they're not in New England.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but that whole mentality, oh, well, this coach failed because he tried to be Belichick, over here, and you can't do that to these men, because they're men. You can't talk to them like they're in New England. Okay, and that's why you will never be New England. And it's like, you look at what's going on, there's never going to be that type of parity in the context of like having more than one team in the Super Bowl every single year as like your final boss, because that's kind of what it's becoming nowadays, is more, it's like it's a final boss that
you've reached the final boss level here.
Yeah,
the Patriots.
It's a tournament. It's a tournament to see which NFC team takes on the Patriots. Is basically what the Super Bowl is nowadays.
Right.
But,
well, it's that 3-team battle. Who winds up AFC Championship against the Patriots? They have the first
right,
track.
right.
And then the two teams battling to face them. Like
yeah,
a
exactly. Yeah.
Game, yeah.
But it's like, but the reason why that is what it is because you have, like I said, you just have one team that's just committed to winning. That's all they are. They're committed to winning, and they want people in there that are committed to winning. Whereas you have, like I said, you have other guys that are focused on themselves, like the Pittsburgh Steelers. Why do the Pittsburgh Steelers collapse on themselves? Because you have more egocentric people that are focused on the brand than they are about the team or about winning. And it's like, until that shifts, you can make all the changes in the world. You can make it, you can make it a 7-step process to how the instant review works. It's never going to change. And so it's like, I've come to terms with that. And that's kind of just why I'm not disappointed with anything. It's like, I've accepted this is how the NFL is going to be. This is what the NFL is going to be until either these guys die off,
well, it's funny that you start off with the, like you said, not, you didn't get political, but you used a political example. But it's sort of funny because that goes to the culture of the country, and this is the country that this sport is played in. So, I mean, it's one of those, yeah, like you said, the talk is there from an owner like Jed York. The talk is there from an owner like Jerry Jones. But so far the results have been way far away from actually, delivering. And yet, like you said, what's going on with Pittsburgh and all that kind of thing. But, I mean, you and I, we both know people that, again, it's not to be political, but it's a cultural thing. We know people that retired with $300,000 in the bank, and almost, one or two things happen, and they're almost, living, they're living paycheck to paycheck almost, right? And so it's hard to blame certain players like a Le'Veon Bell. It's, and that's basically what he came out and said. For me and my family and stuff, it's, I have a rare opportunity to make mega $1 million, and, I would rather make the mega $1 million and secure myself, right, than go and, try to buy into the New England system, but this is the Pittsburgh version of it, right? So you get stuck with that culturally. But, the other thing, though, is at the same time, just to kind of close out here, all that we said, all that was said all season, all that will be said and debated about the Super Bowl, there's going to be 100 shows in 100 different places, from YouTubers to ESPN people and all that kind of stuff, right? Here's also something that's interesting, though. At the end of the day, this is all the fun we have sort of debating back and forth about everything. But Brandon Cooks, bless his heart, he must be the sickest man in America, like that old Dallas Cowboy, the infamous drop touchdown in the Super Bowl against the Steelers decades ago, right? Bless his heart, he must be the sickest man in America. It was right between his hands. That has to be Brandon Cooks right now and the Rams fans, because, like I said, everything we said, everything that the whole world is saying, no matter what will come down to, you had 2 drop passes. The ball was right in his hands, right at the point where every receiver wants to be able to catch it in those positions to come down with it, and he dropped both of them. So for all the talk, even for me, about Jared Goff and all this stuff, yeah, he threw that pick, but the play before, Brandon Cooks dropped it. Had it, would have fallen in the end zone with it, dropped it. I think one quarter before, up high in the end zone, comes down and dropped it in the back of the end zone. So, like, at the end of the day, like you said, even if you get there by chance and because of the culture and because of everything else, and you're not dedicated to be like the Patriots, no matter what, you're that one-hit wonder, you still have to execute, and you got to catch the ball and come down with it. Because if not, well, that kind of stuff closes out of town, and there's no recognition for second place.
So on that note, did you hear the NFL Network leaked congratulating the Patriots on winning the Super Bowl a week before the game?
Yeah, I did see that, yeah.
Okay, just wanted to leave it on that note.
Yeah, it's just, because, well, it was, like I said, you gotta catch the ball. If you catch the ball, he wins the game. But of course, he didn't, and it doesn't matter because it's rigged anyways.